Hello, welcome to this video. So in today's video, we're just going to look at drag and drop functionality in our Next.js application using the dnd-kit. So I'm just going to show you the demo of what you are going to build. Okay. So this is the demo where you have a list of users. Okay. I can drag a Alice Johnson who is in item number 1. I can drag him to position 2. As you can see, he has sticked it there, and we can also have this in position 4 like this. So we are having this functionality of drag and drop happening, and this is also happening on the touch devices. Like in responsive, you will see that this actually still actually works. Okay. So this is, you may think this is a small application, but actually if you have tried to implement a drag and drop in your application, you understand how difficult it is to actually apply this. Now in today's video, I'm just going to try to break it down step by step so that you can easily implement it in your application with ease. Okay. So if you are just like want to join me, let's jump in and start coding. Hello members, welcome to this video. So in today's video, just going to look at something very interesting and something I have always wanted to do for a very long period of time. And every time I could try it, I could end up leaving it on the way, and I'm pushing it to maybe in the future. So I said I have to get this done, and to tell you, this was not easy. And at least most of you must have used Trello, you must have used maybe Kanban sort of thing. And one thing that is enjoyable when you're using Trello, or you're using GitHub Kanban, or you're using Jira, one of these things they add to when you're creating the lists is this drag and drop. And this is one of the most nice things that you look into the app. You're like, dude, if I can create this is so nice. Okay. So you want to create something like this, you want to drag and drop things. So drag and drop is a really, really cool feature if you can do it. Okay. I've always wanted to add it to my app, but all the time I want to add it to the app, I just go and Google, and for some reason the implementation is not that smooth. Okay. So in today's video, we are not going to do this complicated one, and I promise you that I'm going to, in the first time, I'm going to keep it very smooth so that it can be understandable as much as possible. Most videos, most documentations, and most guides I've read, this gets actually complicated, and you end up leaving it on the way and not even implementing it. So I'm just going to take as a learner's perspective. I'm just going to try to actually break it down as small as I can to make it understandable, and we can do it. And so in the I plan to make another video where actually we clone the Trello, something like this. Okay. I know some of my subscribers have requested for this for a long period. I think I got a lot of messages requesting me to do a Trello clone, something like that. And you want actually to do this Trello clone. And in the first episode, or in this video, I'm not starting on a Trello clone, but I'm actually breaking down the concepts related to drag and drop. How do you actually implement a drag and drop like this, okay, on a list? And let alone we'll be able to create a columns, and then we do this horizontal sorting like so. So if you understand the vertical sorting, later on we're going to use it to do this horizontal sorting and dragging like so. So we're also going to use a very simple list. and I have my Next.js app running on port 3000, and it has this app. The app has a list of users, as you can see them. Alice Johnson has an ID of 1, Bob Smith, and so on and so forth. We have about 6 users, and I simply rendered them on the on this. Now, this starter template with this user list, including this sample data, you are going to find it on this GitHub repo. Okay, so I have this GitHub repo I've created, and I'm just going to, it's going to have 2 branches. I'll create another branch called complete, which will actually have the complete code. And then in the first one, this main, will just have a starter code that you will clone and start with that. So actually, I'm just going to start with that. I will first actually create a branch. So I'm just going to say git, and I'm just going to say git checkout. I think that's the command for creating a new branch. I'm just going to call it complete. Just something like this. Okay, so it will create a branch called complete, and you can see I've switched to branch called complete. Okay, now this will enable us to remain with the starter code as well as to be in this complete to implement the features. So if I'm taking you to the app here, you can see that we have this users list, and this is in the page. And when you just go into data, I have another folder called data here, which has actually the list of users. And there were 10 users. I commented 3 just to make the list short, just like this. And even an interface for a user, which is this one. And I created 2 components. The first one is to render the whole users list. So you can see here, I have this, which has like a users list. And then from this, you can see I have mapping through the users, and we're importing these users from the data data users. And similarly, we just like bring in this sortable user. The name sortable user has nothing to do with drag and drop. I simply named it a sortable user. You can name it anything. It can be sortable item. It can be just user component. Can be anything. Okay. So if you just go inside here, I have this sortable user component. As I've said, the name of the component does not matter. You can name it anything so long as it is the single item that you are going to be sorting. I named it sortable user because I want to use it to be, it is the one which is going to be sorted, or the one which is going to be draggable. Okay. Now, so after this, you can see I'm rendering just the initials plus this username plus the ID, and therefore we get this. Okay. So as I've said, there are so many places or so many libraries for implementing React drag and drop. And if you searched maybe something like React drag and drop, React drag and drop, drag and drop, and this is the thing. When you search React drag and drop, you will just find these things like React DND. And if you scroll down, there is, React Beautiful DND and so many others. And there is also this dnd-kit. There is even React Flow, drag and drop. There are so many places you are going to find this. Okay. Now, at least I've looked into all of them. They are not actually, all of them are not easy. Okay. All of them are not easy to implement. Even when they sweeten it that it is very easy to implement, it is not. If you look in the code and the snippets, some of even the code they give does not actually do the drag and drop that you might want in your app. So I chose a dnd-kit, and for the reasons of like it is the latest one and the modern. If you go React DND, it is no longer maintainable very well. Plus this beautiful DND. So we are taking going with dnd-kit for now. You could also just search if you want to use others. You can still go ahead and read documentation. I'm just going to use the dnd-kit because it is heavily supported and it is the most modern one. Okay, moving on. So we are going to use this dnd-kit. Okay, so they give you the documentation, examples. As I've said, all these things is sweetened. Actually, when you just go here, you first of all, when you go to installation, you may think you only need, for instance, in the core, and you might actually be tricked to install only this one, and which actually doesn't work alone. Okay, that's what that's what I've already said. Like the documentation can sometimes really be tricky, and they don't give you like a really working example right away. I don't know why. Even when you just go to examples, they have this a risk setup, which is for actual drag. Okay. Uh, so this drag itself might not be something you're interested in. Okay. Yeah, might not be something like what do you use? Like if I drag this to here, then what? You know? So, but combining dragging capabilities plus sorting capabilities, you can come up to with a sortable list and draggable list. So what we want is sorry. What we want is to be able to drag, for instance, Alice Johnson from position 1 and we drag him maybe to position 2, and this Alice Bob Smith becomes in position 1, something like this. So we're just going to start the implementation. And to do that, what I did, as usual, I created a documentation, and you're going to find this, or I will leave this link in the description. And this is to help us simplify the process and even documenting this so that if you're implementing it in your own app, you just take this as a basic example, just in case you're not going to be using the repo I'm providing. At least you can always document this or find this in the documentation. So implementing drag and drop with dnd-kit in Next.js project. The first step one, as we said, you have to create your Next.js project, of which we have done. And then the second one is to install the required packages. Now, as I've said, when you go to the installation of this, you see we have, for instance, here the dnd core, which you might have said you may think it is actually you need only this one, but you to pull this one off, you need actually 3 packages. So the dnd core, and then you need the sortable, and then the utilities. We are going to see all these ones play a different role in implementing this functionality for drag and drop. So I'm just going to copy this and go ahead and install the 3 packages, just like this. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and install this. Okay, so while it is installing, let's go ahead and see step number 2. So step number 2 is creating the lists of users. As we said, I have already created this data users.ts. We already have this data users.ts, and I added the users for you. Okay, then this is, so you take the same format if you want to implement it and you're using another list or anything else. Just make sure you have your list in this order. And one thing, take a note on this. I might have not written it here, but the one thing that you have to take a note when you're creating the list is to make sure that your list has an ID. It is a must that your list must contain a unique identifier, not necessarily an ID. It can be an email, but something which is actually unique. Because the dnd package is going to use this unique identifier somewhere while it is doing the sorting. The second thing, or the third thing you can just do, is creating the homepage component, which actually has the list, which we have also created. Here we have this list. So whichever you're using, make sure you can show your list. And I always use this pattern of, if I'm having a list or I'm displaying things in the page, I always put a component like this, because this one can have a highly, so for instance, here we could fetch, here we could do fetch data from the API, fetch data from the backend API, you know, so like from a server action or something. So always leave this to just simply render the component like this, so that this one is always a server component. And then you can always just create another component for rendering the list or putting whatever you want to put in. So I always keep my pages server components, and then I can make these other components to be just client components at some point. So when you just go to this, we created also the users list. So you can see in the components, I have two components, the sortable user plus the user list. So in this, I have this list of users where we map this sortable user. Now, if you just go in this, you also create this list, and then you also, finally, you also have this sortable user. So after you have installed, the first thing you're going to do is, after you have installed, you have done everything, the first thing is to wrap, okay, is to go and wrap this list in the context. So we're just going to use dnd context. So you just simply have to wrap this dnd context, and you can see it is coming from the core. Okay, so the ND context comes from the core, and this is to define that this list will involve drag and things. So it takes in more properties, but the one we are interested right now, they are going to be, the first one is going to be, I think, a you can just do, sorry, you can do this, and you can see what can be taken if you're using TypeScript. The first one, you can see we have collision detection. So add collision detection, and this one just going to use closest, something like closest center. I think closest corners. I think it was closest corners, something like this. Let me just copy that one before I move on. So it is closest center. Just going to use closest center here, as you can see, closest center, and you can just remove this. We are not using closest corners. Okay, so another thing you just have to pass in this dnd context is going to be, I think, the strategy. Let me see, it is on drag. So you have to see, we have this so many things, but one function we need is this on drag end. So you can just say on drag end, and we're just going to create a custom function here. Function on drag end, you can just say handle drag end, and this is going to be a function, okay, that takes in an event, event. And we're just going to go ahead and console.log like event. Okay, something like this. And of course, TypeScript is not going to allow this. So where do we get the types for this event? So the easy way to get it is coming here, and you try to actually do something like this, event, and then here you can just say console.log event, something like this. So when you put TypeScript, whenever you put something like this on inline, it will try to actually just do use inference to infer the event. So as you can see, if I hover on event, they're telling me it is a drag event. So just come here, just like this, drag end event. I'll just going to come here and I say this is a drag end event, drag end event, something like this, drag end event. And you can see this is also coming from the core. Okay, so you can just remove this, and I'm just going to simply add the function handle drag end, something like this. Okay, So this is the first step you are going to do. We just wrap our entire list in this context, and this is to define that this list is going to involve dragging of the list. So the second one is we are going to add also to wrap this in a sortable context. And this is to say this one is also going to be sortable. So you can just say sortable context. Okay, and this is why we need the sorting. Okay, you can see now the first ones we are coming from the core, and then the second one is coming from the sortable. And that's why we needed the dnd sortable. So now when you hover onto this, if you save and hover onto this, you will see that the items is missing. So this one must take in the items, and the purpose of all the difference between dragging, if you just go to their website, this drag. So this is dragging, okay? But then the one we want to implement is actually sorting. If you go here, you have to go ahead and make this use client for now. Okay, that's why I just make this use client. So the one we want to implement the list is not just like only dragging, but actually sorting it. That's why we need this sortable context or the sorting at large. And it takes in the items, and the items is the list that you are trying to sort, and you're just going to say users. Okay. Now, if this list didn't have a unique identifier, because they are saying this has an ID, okay, it has this ID, they actually see that there is a unique identifier. If you go ahead and strip off the ID, you will see that you will have an error actually within this here. This users, this sortable context will complain. Now, another thing we just pass in this is actually the strategy. And this strategy is to define how do you want to sort. Is it like in the vertical sorting or horizontal setting? So there is something called vertical list sorting strategy. So this is the strategy you're going to use. Okay, and this is depends if you want to be sorting, like if you have, because as you can see, we have in this, we have this, for instance, 1 card 2 3. So you can see this sorting is horizontal, while within the card we have this is vertical. Okay, so now so far this it has nothing it is doing like dragging or anything, but we are so near. We have the sortable, we have passed in this. Okay, so in this drag end, if you just go into the sortable, I think we pass in the items and then this. Now to the sortable user, okay, here we are going to use one hook. So just say const. I'm just going to go into this. They have a hook called use sortable. Okay. And this hook, if you see it, it actually takes in an ID. Okay. It takes in an ID or the unique ID. So we just do structure, and we're just going to say ID is user.id. So you have to pass in the ID within this. That's why, first of all, you need this to have a unique identifier. Okay. And this unique identifier, for instance, if it was an email, you would say user.email. Then from this, okay, from this hook, we get a number of things. Okay. For instance, we have listeners. Okay, if you just continue, I think we have listeners, we have transform, transition, and what else? Let me just do this. We have attributes. I think there are 4 things we need, and then another thing is the node ref. So I think it is set node ref. Okay, so we get all these things here. And if to or to try to make you understand, if we try to implement this on our own, okay, if you try to implement this on your own, you would need a lot of things, including, for instance, you need to know this item, you need to know the item you're dragging over, you need to know their positions, you need to listen for the drag, you need to do a lot of things. And they exposed all these things here, and we simply pass them to the item. So the first thing is to identify this item using a ref, okay, just like this. And then you say it is a set node ref. So this one helps the package, or helps you to identify which item are we trying to drag, okay. And then other things are passed just like props. These props are passed just like this. You simply come here and you pass these, for instance, the listeners. And then you can also pass, is this we're supposed to spread them? Just wait a second. I just want to go down here. Mm, yeah, that's how you spread them. So we have to spread all these other props, more especially the listeners. This is to help us listen for the drag events. And then another one is the you have to spread the attributes. So here we spread the attributes. Okay, now we remain with two things, the transform and the transition. Now, these two properties are actually for animations. Okay, like transform and transitions are for animations. And to be able to apply this, we have to apply this to styles. Okay, so we have to apply styles of this element because these ones are animations, to animate, to handle animations while dragging and dropping. So to do that, you have to say const style. You have to create some styles, and we're going to use these to create these styles. So just going to create an object, and in this object, the first one, we can pass in the, I think, transition. We can first pass in the transition. We don't want to modify this, but then we are going to pass in another one, which is, I think it is transform. Just a second. I do the copying. Yes, it is the transform. So another one is the transform, and transform, we are going to modify this. So transform, here we're just going to say CSS. Now the CSS, you don't actually just write CSS, you import the CSS utility from the third package we installed, the dnd-kit utilities. So you can see all the three packages, we have used them. Now this was the last one, CSS, these utilities is why we are getting this CSS. And this is the CSS that is going to be having the animations. So CSS dot transform, as we want to do the transform, then dot to string, and then to this one, you can pass in this transform. So you pass in this transform that we get from this use sortable. So after getting this style, we can now pass it into here. So you can just come here and say style is going to be style, something like this. Okay. So with this, it is going to actually help us implement the drag. Now let's just see if we have at least a dragging taking place. So you can say I'm dragging and it is draggable. If I drag this, the dragging is happening actually, but then we're not having it persisting. Okay, we're not having this persisting. Now, what is actually remaining is we didn't handle this in the users list. On this dnd-kit, we pass this on drag end. So they don't know what exactly they should do when the drag is ended. Okay, when you finish the drag, what should happen? We want it to remain in place. We want that if this happens, if you drag this to number 2, we want this to actually happen or remain in number 2. Now to do that, you can see it involves a number of things. One, we have to swap the index. This in the user list, Alice Johnson is swapping the position. So we have to do that. And another thing is we have to re-render another list with the swapped positions. Now that one seems like a lot of work, which it is, but it is not as complicated as you may think. So first of all, went ahead and console the event when we drag. So if I just go here, I go to inspect. I don't want right now to be in responsive. We are going to talk about that. For now, just leave it not in responsive. Just leave it on the desktop like this. So if I just right now clear and I try to actually drag Alice like this, you can see we have an actual event and it is an object containing other objects. The most interesting ones we are required or we need is the active object plus the over object. The active object is involving the item that is being dragged, and this is the item that is being replaced. This one. Okay, we have the active plus, because you can see ID of 1, it is Alice Johnson, which is the one we are trying to drag. And over is ID 2, which is actually Bob Smith, which is the ID of the item that is being replaced in that position. So the first thing we can actually get here is getting const, and from the event we can actually get the active plus the over from the event. So you can destructure them like this. And the first thing we want to test is that if someone actually didn't, he actually dragged, but he didn't replace, for instance, if you drag and release it in place, okay? If you drag and release it in place, you are trying to replace itself. So we have to check for that. We don't want anything to happen. If, for instance, if, so just going to write an if statement, if active, okay, dot id is equal to over dot id, okay, so we want this to actually return, not to do anything, because this means that you are dragging it, but you're not replacing it. It is trying to replace itself, like on that very position. So we don't want to do anything with this. Okay, so and here is saying this is possible now, which is true. Just simply add a question mark here, like so. Okay, so when we handle this situation, okay, here we're trying to handle item replacing itself like this. So now let's handle the serious one, where we need to swap the positions and so on. So the first thing is we need to modify this list. Okay, this list of users we have here, we have to modify it a little bit, because every time you do the sorting, the list changes. So at least we have to be having a way of changing this list every time we do the sorting, we do the dragging, because when you just go ahead and drag add to this, the list has actually changed. The list changes. So we need to handle the moving or the sorting, or this moving or this dragging. We have to handle the switching of the array itself. So the array is going to be modified, and that we can first actually create a state here to handle that. So on top here, and say const, and I just say maybe user list set user list is equal to use state. Okay, now I'm creating a state, that this state, because there is no way we can modify this list if we don't have a state. This is the easy way you can modify the state. Okay, if I had this set user list, Okay, so by default, I'll just use the users we are getting from this one to be the default list. So it means that now user list is equal to the users, meaning I can replace here and I use user list, something like this. That means I can do this and nothing should happen. As you can see, nothing has happened. We still have exactly the same list. What has changed though is now we have ability to actually set a list. So within this function, I'm just going to say set user list. And what are we actually setting this user list? The first thing is that we can actually have access to the previous users. Okay, if you just know the set this set user function, you know that it can access the previous list or the current list before modification. So we can access users and we can use these users in a very nice way. So we need a number of things. The first one, we need to get the index or the positions. We need to get the position of the item being dragged, and we also need the position of the item being replaced. Okay, and then finally we just have to swap. Okay, swap and also render the list. Okay, swap and generate a new list. Generate a new list. This is what needs to happen. Okay, we need to first get the position of the item that is being dragged. So you can just say maybe this is the item original position. Okay, so item, so you can say const item original original position, original pose, a pose is equal to, so just going to actually have the use this users, and this one has nothing to do with these users. I'm seeing guys saying is it meaning these users? No, this is, I can call this anything. I can call it user data. Like this represents the previous state before modification. So this one is representing this user list. Okay, so I can just call it anything I want. I'm just going to call it users for now. And I'm just going to say, for instance, I can say users dot find index. We're interested in the index, not the item. So the index dot find index, and this one takes in, of course, an item. And then here we can just check and say item dot id equal to so this one is the active, so you say active dot id like this, and then we can just go ahead and just look for the now item new position. So this is the new position that is and this is the position of the item that is going to be replaced. This is the item new position. So here it is what we say over id, and this one, of course, we put the question mark just like this. So after getting these two positions, the item original position and the new position, we have actually from I think we have this function called array move. So just going to return an array. So array move, okay. So this one comes from this. This one is going to actually help us swap and generate a new list. And what does this one want? This array move is a function that expects you to pass in, you can say from and to. So it expects you to pass in, first of all, the list. So just going to pass in the users, which we have here. That is the old list. So it has to generate a, it will have to take the old list plus the item original position and the item new position. So here I'm just going to say item original position plus the item new position. So it takes in this and then it is going to go ahead and return a list, a new list with the swapped positions. Okay, a new list with swapped positions, and that means that when this function drag end happens, the list is going to be regenerated with the swapped positions. Okay, so I think that's the one we want. I'm also going to confirm the positions from here. From this, which is up here, I guess. So, or the index, this is the original position, and then the new index is the new position, and then you pass in just like this. And now we should just have something happening. So just go to this, drag it. Now you can see actually it is staying in position. So Bob now is in position 1. Alice Johnson is in position 2. If you just go and get Charles Brown and drag him to position 4, you see that actually he stays there in a position, and they swap the positions, it rearranges. Okay, and that's how easy you can implement the drag and drop. I hope I've tried to explain each and everything slowly and step by step, okay, to be understandable. More especially, this is the hard part here, but I've tried to explain the steps that you need to do. Now, there is still one more thing which is very important before we conclude this, is now going to the responsive part, meaning the mobile devices, plus the keyboard accessibility functionalities. If you put it in the responsive format, I have here a phone, a Samsung Galaxy S20. You can just choose in any of these phones. I'm just going to go ahead and choose 100% so that we can see this very well. Now you see that the mouse now becomes a touch event. Okay, it changes into a touch. So this, if you try to implement, first of all, let me just refresh. We got the original position. If I try to drag, and you can see this is not happening. Okay, I'm trying my level best to drag, but it is not working. As you can see, this is hardly working, and if you're using a real phone, this is not going to work. Okay, and the reason being is that this by default, it doesn't work on the touch event, things which are not having cursor, cursors, and it is just having a touch. And for this, we have to use the sensors. Now you are trying to see how all these things actually come into play. We have the sensors, modifiers, draggable, droppable. We haven't even used droppable, draggable anywhere, which we're just going to see when just like using other, like implementing this Kanibani or this one. For now, want to only just now add this, and to do the touch events, we need to do to include sensors. Okay, so with this, go back to the list, and you're also going to create here some sensors. So you have to create sensors by yourself and then apply them. So you say const sensors, and you say, for instance, it has this hook called use sensors. Okay, there is use sensor and use sensors. So it is sensors we created by saying use sensors, and then here we pass a list of sensors. And to create a sensor, you simply say use sensor. So now this is not use sensors, but use sensor. Just create a single sensor. And the first one is where we pass the touch, I think it's touch sensor, something like that. Or touch event. Just a second. Let me just confirm the sensors we need. There are three. I think about three sensors. Okay, so the first one is for the pointer sensor, touch sensor, and the keyboard sensor. So the pointer. So the first one is the pointer sensor. Okay, And every time you add a sensor, you add a comma to add another sensor. So I'm just going to add a comma and duplicate this 3 times. The second one is the touch sensor. And the last one is the keyboard sensor. Okay, now the keyboard sensor takes in one more setting, which is the coordinates. So put this and just say coordinate getter, since it's coordinate getter, something like that. And then this one coordinate getter takes in the keyboard coordinates. Keyboard and something sortable keyboard coordinates. Okay, something like this. So you need 3 sensors to be able to actually make it work on small screen. You can see the one is for the pointer events, another one is for the touch events, and then the keyboard. The keyboard means you can actually use the keyboard to drag and drop still using the keyboard. Now, to do this, you just go to the DND context, not the sortable context, but the DND context, and then you can apply these sensors. And then you say sensors is equal sensors, like this. Now, with this, it might also not work. There is one more thing that needs to be done. Just going to refresh. If you try, we are still having the same difficulties to implement this. And this is because I don't know if this is actually there. Let me refresh this page. I don't know if it has there. It is here, 3.4. That to make this work, you need to add a custom class to the sortable item. Like this, it is something like they don't actually mention. When just like on this, we have to create this touch action to none. Okay, so just simply create this class in CSS. I'm just going to go here in global.css, and below I'm just going to add this touch action none. This is my custom class, and then copy this, take it to the sortable item here. I'm just going to add it to these classes, just like this. I'm just going to go ahead and refresh. So now this should just actually work smoothly, as you can see. Okay, and this can also just use the keyboard. If you just like a touch, you can press tab. I think it's alt something, alt to move or something. I'm not so sure if it's like shift to move or just like alt down or something. But you can use, because you can see you can select using a keyboard. You can use a keyboard to move them around. Okay, so now you can see we can now drag. Okay, we can now drag. I'm just going to refresh. We can now drag to this, okay, and drag this back to its position, can drag this to position 4, and so on and so forth. So now this has been the drag and drop. So in the next video, I don't know when I'm going to create it, depending on how you are going to like this and the comments I'm going to receive. I'm just going to create a more advanced one where we implement this kind of functionality, where we have the drag and drop between, first of all, the cards, and then you have also between the lists. And then you can see there is even more complications, whereby like you look at the CSS, when you are dragging this, and then when you drag, and then it creates that illusion of an empty card. Those are the transitions you have to customize. Okay, so yeah, if I'm also just create this video where I now talk about the advanced one, and it is going to be really massive. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.